Okay, Josh. So I was talking to my wife, and if you know Sabrina, if you're listening to this podcast, my wife is a highly artistic person, very creative, very much in touch not only with what she's doing, but also the people that it speaks to, like every good artist should be. She and I have actually had conversations more recently around the intersection of business and art because these are very different worlds that support one another, especially in the greater globe of things, I think. So I kind of wanted to riff on this a little bit with you today. You game?
Yeah,
All
let's
right,
talk about
launch
it.
out onto the loop today as we discuss the intersection of business and art today on Curiosity Continuum.
Hey, everybody, this is Josh.
And this is Brian.
Welcome to the podcast for Curiosity Continuum.
Curiosity Continuum is an industry innovating, non traditional company passionate about growing wisdom in the next generation.
We are the essential bridge between the analog and digital worlds by building collaborative communities that unleash the power of adaptive expertise and innovation needed to thrive in the 21st century.
We combine and mix essential elements needed to empower people to succeed in new ways, not possible outside of a creative, thoughtful, diverse community of fellow curious people.
Follow us in your favorite podcast app to receive notifications of new content. If you like what you hear and you want to dive deeper, please visit us at curiositycontinuum.com. Thanks for tuning in, and let's start the conversation.
All right, so there was actually some gaming news that came out today, and so this was a big announcement, especially in the circles that Josh runs in. Would you mind sharing that with folks?
Yeah, not at all. So the whole announcement has to go around with mergers and acquisitions, which in the gaming sphere is a big deal because people kind of like gobble up small fish, gobble up big fish, and then there's less competition all around, right? So today, Microsoft has announced their intentions, and in fact, it's more than that. They've actually announced the buying of Blizzard Activision, or Activision Blizzard, which is a huge conglomerate that's been around for many years, for $68.7 billion, all in cash, by the way. So
It's a lot of
write
money.
that check, my friend. Write that check.
I'll get right on
Yeah.
that. I don't know if it'll clear the bank yet. I say yet, folks, because it's yet. With things like that, there's business things. So for people who aren't familiar with the gaming industry, everybody's heard of Microsoft. Blizzard would be something like if you had like a Warner Brothers or you had a Paramount, or you're talking about like Hollywood
Yeah.
studios. In that regard, same type of thing. It's like when you've seen Disney start to gobble up Fox, and they own Hulu, and many different platform acquisitions, starts to feel about that way.
Right.
And so what happens is, especially if you're Blizzard and you've done what you've done for many years. So some of the titles in Blizzard, one of them is Call of Duty, I think it is, right?
Yeah,
Josh?
that's Activision title, but yeah, Blizzard title everyone's familiar with is Diablo. That's something that they've made in Warcraft and all that. So yeah, they got gobbled up by Activision in the 90s or early
Got it.
2000s. And then they were
Okay.
Activision Blizzard. And they were that way for about
Got-
20 years.
So to kind of put it in context for people who don't know the gaming sphere, just like there's major franchises of movies, like it's Pirates of the Caribbean, for example,
Yeah.
or Fast and the Furious.
Mission Impossible,
These
Star
titles,
Trek, Star Wars, all these things. Yeah.
yes, the gaming industry has similar titles. So Diablo, that Josh mentioned, is one of those, and these titles garner a humongous following.
Yep.
That's a revenue juggernaut, and you have really die-hard fans who play these games. Some, they buy the new release every time it comes out because they want to continue their arc of story. They may buy it on another platform just to be able to play the game.
I mean, like example with Blizzard Activision, the biggest one is Call of Duty. They release that every year. They have 4 studios dedicated to the Call of Duty, and all they do is rotate between these 4 different studios. So every year it's one. So they all have 4 years to develop a title, but they sell $1 billion plus every year. every year. Now, this year it was kind of dropped a little bit, but it was still the number one selling game of 2021. So, I mean, they're like competing against themselves at this point.
So you're going to ask yourself, how does this relate to my wife?
Right.
This is how we started it. We talked about this, but I wanted to go on that track to say this. I think everybody's really familiar with having like movies being rehashed or rebooted again. And you have these big titles in the gaming industry, right? These things are now artistic expressions of people's,
Yeah.
code, of their drawings, of all their
Right.
art, translated into a commerce vehicle that goes again and again and again. There is a really fine line that a lot of artists have to get comfortable with when you start to talk about scalability. Now, oftentimes when you see like an artist, even a famous, well-to-do artist, and it takes them like 2 or 3 years to prepare for an exhibit, it's because they are the sole choke point in their business.
Yeah.
Only they are creating the paintings. So there is no like, hey, let me just like hire 20 people on contract to do my piece like that.
Right.
That's not how most mediums work. So what happens is you have to make the decision at some point as an artistic person to say where my art, my pure art kind of ends, and I'm okay to like not have as deep of a touch when something has to scale. And I've heard this said again by many, many successful creative artistic people who have scaled a brand up. Now, as soon as you do that, you start to almost gain criticism from like true, quote, true artists because you became commercially successful.
Sure. I can actually hear that, because problem with artists and art is that it's such a personal thing to the artist. And when you look at the business side of it, these people don't understand, or they don't really care if they sell a gajillion of them, right? Or they see it as an extension of themselves. So part of it is you have to learn as an artist or somebody who's creative, anyone who's creative. You just don't have to be an artist. Where does your art end, and you're willing to kind of stop it there and maybe even stop iterating on it for a while and let the kind of business side pull it. So like with games, that happens all the time. These guys are, it's their baby and they don't want to let it go. And we've said that before on the show, is that don't make things your baby, but it's hard when you've nurtured it from nothing all the way up to something. And then now other people are want it, right, Brian? So that's kind of where these people are coming from. And knowing that would actually help the business people, and the business people would help by knowing that, but they don't really intermingle that much. And so I think the real lesson in this episode is just kind of like learn the differences between the two and kind of get to know the differences between the two. And then you'll kind of be able to put them all together, huh?
Then you can also have a kind of a clear prioritization scheme. And there's not a right or wrong answer here, folks. But, I had a colleague, he was in a hardcore band years ago, and he does video production now. And he said, I'm very clear where my line of art and like me having my job as a video producer kind of comes in. For him, like his music is truly his art. So he'll make sure that like he protects that a little bit differently. But for him as skills as a video producer, he'll be able to just, say, hey, there's a client, they want to do a launch of a brand, or they want to do some story about their company. He goes, I understand where that line is. And he goes, and I'm okay with that. Now he's made that decision for himself because he said, how I use my creative gifts over here is really more for the sake of commerce. When it comes to his music, he's really dedicated it more toward the artistic side of it. And I would encourage you enjoy both and appreciate both for what they are. When it's pure art, enjoy it for what it is, because it is an artistic statement. In the same way, if you have a business that's run really well, appreciate that. It's a lot of effort to making that thing work. When you have a situation, though, where maybe an artist is considering going bigger or scaling up, you really have to ask yourself the question of, are you wanting to actually do that?
Right.
Or do you just want more people to recognize you as brilliant or pay more money for the pieces you create Because that's a very different scalability picture.
Yeah, I mean, that's a trade-off too. Like that is one of those things where if you just want your art to be more well known, if you want to make more money, that's the business side of it. So you're going to have to be willing to give something up. It's not going to be, there are very few people that can write their own check and just do whatever they want. And if they can, they have gotten that way usually by giving up a lot. I mean, I think some of the most famous artists today that are like prolific artists have done that, and they've given up things in the past. They've even talked about it. Like Lady Gaga, for example, or I even hate to use it, but Taylor Swift, she gave up a lot to just get started. She had to sign a lot of deals that she didn't want to sign because it was getting her notoriety. And that's kind of where you got to start sometimes. And you have to understand, like, are you robbing Peter to pay Paul, or are you just getting yourself known and you're making yourself the brand? And once you do that, then you can kind of write your own path, right? So I think the big lesson here is obviously don't make anything your baby. That's always a lesson. But another really good one is be flexible with reality, because I think the idea in your head is not going to be the idea of reality a lot of times.
When you keep it flexible, you kind of understand what the goal is maybe for each stage of that. Taylor Swift did a really smart thing, I think, where she wanted to get control of some of her old catalog, and the recordings of those were still controlled by somebody else. She re-recorded those same songs again, so she can license a different version of that out.
Right.
And so she's kind of like moved the business pieces of it. But see, that's some very smart counsel that she got, or a creative way to address like how she would like to handle her art, which is a business as well. There's a lot of wonderful musicians. Some of the best musicians in the world never make a living at it.
Right.
They're excellent at what they do. A great example of that is our friend John from growing up. Super talented musician. He plays just about anything. So he's one of those guys.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And, guitar for longer than I think some people have been alive.
Sure.
And he plays great. But, that wasn't ever his full-time vocation. There were things that he did on top of other things, and he's super talented. But that wasn't something where he was a working musician, so I don't mean that that way. In like his younger years, his family band would go out and they'd play things and they'd make money, right? So some of that was his job. But like as he got later in life, like it switched. Like he put that in a different place in his life. Part of the issue I think that happens with people is they see the end goal and they become very rigid. Like Josh said, like they've made it their baby. Like this is exactly how it's going to go. Especially like, I'm going to put this piece here in this gallery, and then people are going to start buying it for $1 million a piece. And then it's going to be $10 million a piece. And then suddenly it's this way. And there's all this space in between about where it varies.
Yeah.
They know how they started, they know where they ended up, but success is a very jagged journey. It's never like this really smooth path that's just paved that way, because you're paving the road literally as
you go. And part of it is too, is people that are looking at you only see the end, because they only see what you become. They don't see what you were. They don't understand where you started. They don't understand the sacrifice you made to become there. Like, I know a lot of people like to, like really harp on some of the ultra rich people in our society, like Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates and stuff. But a lot of these guys, I mean, they started in their parents' garage, and they started with like maybe $20,000 seed money, and they had a part-time job at IHOP, and they worked like every single second of the day at their job, and then came home and worked their other job to make their living. So, I mean, when you talk to these people, I mean, they're just normal people that had a vision. And I've watched this with Elon Musk was saying this a lot of times, is that people will go 99% of the way, but they just won't go that extra 1%, because that's where it gets really hard. It gets really hard. And Brian and I have firsthand knowledge of this. It gets really hard to kind of keep going sometimes when you're not seeing the fruits of your labor in real time. You're seeing it delayed, and you're like, oh, I want it to be now, You just got to know it's just about perseverance. And that's what this whole thing really is art is a business and business is art. It's all the same. You just have to have a vision and keep going for it, right, Brian?
Yeah. And with that vision, you're breaking it down into your addressable tasks and things. Sometimes there's big leaps. Oftentimes it's just stepping it out.
Yeah,
And
just talking to another
planning to do
person,
it. Yeah. And then so you kind of know, like, it's a pile of many little choices really at the end. People like to take the big decisions or that moment where it turned
Right.
or there was a deal.
Right.
And those are important, but all the other little decisions to get to that point, like, don't mistake that as like not important. For the same thing for the artists too, how many paintings did they do before they got recognized?
Yeah.
In my wife's case for Mosaic or whatever, how many times did you do it before people said, boy, you're really good at that? All those times when you're a musician and you're playing to the parking lot, because that's who showed up, was the parking lot.
Right.
Like nobody there but the cars. Those things matter. Those little things matter. And when you start to say, well, do I want it to go here? Do I want it to go this way? Like in terms of, do I want to stay an artist? Do I want to make a business? What do I need what do I borrow from both parts of my brain for both of them? It's a negotiation within yourself, honestly, to say, what am I okay with? And then honestly, like, there's the outworking of it. That's not your only idea in life. You'll have other ideas.
Yeah. I think that's really good, Brian. I think we just let people kind of sit with that for a while. How about that?
All right. Well, until next time, this is Brian.
And this is Josh.
For Curiosity Continuum.